Give me one reason to stay here, and I'll turn right back around. Give me one reason to stay here, and I'll turn right back around. Said I don't wanna leave you lonely. You gotta make me change my mind. Baby, I've got your number, and I know that you got mine. You know that I called you, I called too many times. You got to call me, baby. You can call me anytime. You got to call me. Give me one reason to stay here, and I'll turn right back around. Give me one reason to stay here. Oh, I'll turn right back around. Said I don't want to leave you lonely. You better make me change my mind.
Warning: this podcast features adult subject matter, adult language, and things not meant for children to hear. Viewer discretion is advised. You've been warned.
Backstreet Boys be damned. We are live, ladies and gentlemen, here on the I'm No Joe YouTube channel. Thank you very much for tuning in with us to the latest episode of the I'm No Joe podcast, the place where every armchair quarterback can feel like an Eddie Bravo. Thank you, folks, for tuning in. Tonight, we have a very interesting, for lack of a better term, show for you this evening. As is the case with most of the last few weeks, we have got all of the news and recent events, fight announcements, and whatnot that have come down the line, even though it's been sort of a trickle the last week or so. But we also, this weekend, have one man to thank for the entertainment that we do have this wonderful weekend. One of the greatest Americans that we have, Uncle Chael himself. But we'll get into that in just a little bit. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, take a moment here. Thank the fine folks who are willing to come along on this crazy train that is the I'm No Joe show and break down the shenanigans and shit talk for you wonderful folks along with me. First and foremost, the freshest guest a man could ask for, Mr. Fresh03 himself. How are you doing this evening, sir?
I'm doing okay. Got a player I really liked in the draft, and I got a player I was only okay with. So I figure I'm walking out ahead of the game here in the draft.
Yeah.
So.
Gonna be
Don't
interesting.
worry, guys. I am keeping an eye on picks.
Nice.
So when things come up, if you don't spot them, I'll let you know.
Very nice, very nice. And yeah, for those who don't know, those who are just listening, I do have to apologize to those of you who are actually watching. We are actually starting a little bit later than normal this evening. Not that we ever start on time per se, but we are later than normal this evening because the NFL draft is going live with the first ever virtual draft, and it has absolutely been a sight to see unfold. So we actually did get a little bit distracted. We are running a little bit late. For that, I do apologize for those of you that are here live. For those of you listening, you won't notice that, but I'm going to tell you anyway because we're kind of transparent around here. But across the octagon, as it were, from me, more often than not, my Wednesday night compatriot, my combat talk homeboy here, my brother from another mother, and shit talking the one and only Golf T Vapes. How you doing, sir?
Not too bad. Glad we have something to look forward to this weekend and possibly some stuff in the near future, depending on what continues to play out with this reunion tour.
I agree. Do want to say hi to Sin out there in the chat, even though YouTube is dropping the ball hard on the notification levels. But I do want to say, even though it has been a very strange week thanks to the reunion tour, we didn't get any massively crazy news as a result of it. We do have some semi-expected things to talk about here. We do have some kind of surprising things to talk about here. So we will jump right into it. The first thing I want to talk about here, like I say, I try and give everybody in the world of combat sports as equal coverage as I can here. So we did get the official announcement this week that the PFL has officially suspended their entire 2020 season because they are the only MMA organization that actually works the year throughout like a quote unquote traditional sports team does or a sports organization does. They have the regular season, they have your playoffs, and then your finals, and then your quote unquote Super Bowl-esque final for the $1 million, as it were. They have put the entire year on hold. They are not even going to try and get everything back into place. They do say they are still going to try and get events held once the Backstreet Boys are back in check, all right? But the way that they calculate their season just isn't going to be feasible this year, so it's going to be interesting to see how they recover from this, because very little doubt that they were going to come back, but their whole kind of shtick, their niche, if you will, in the MMA world is that they have a regular season. Your regular season stats matter because that will get you into the playoffs, and then the playoffs will lead you to the big dance where you get the chance for your $1 million per division prize with PFL. Going to be neat to see how they pull back from that and figure out what they're going to do, if they're still going to do the $1 million per division this year, if they're going to have, sub-sanctioned rules, if they're going to modify the season itself once we find out when everything can start to get rolling again, like the NFL, like the MLB, like all the other major sports organizations are starting to do, if they're going to try and taper their schedule and reroute it. I don't know. It's going to be neat to follow. Coming off of that, we found out that, kind of to tie into this, we found out this week that literally the day before UFC Brasilia happened, the last Fight Night UFC promotion that happened, and the first of the series of promotions that were still able to go on with no crowds, that event literally only got to happen by one day, and that one day was bought by the UFC negotiating with the Brazilian government. Since then, they have basically locked down the country. Brazil got hit pretty hard with Backstreet Boys. They kind of thought they were going to early on, which is why we almost didn't get the Brasilia event to begin with. And then when we did, there was no crowd there to be had. They have since locked everything down and intend to stay locked down and are going to ride this reunion tour out. So they officially announced this week that even though we kind of suspected it, it is now official. UFC 250 will not be taking place down in Brazil. They have no plans to reopen any large organized gatherings, let alone put on sports broadcasts, the likes of even the more narrowed version that we saw in Brasilia. No plans for any of that until the fall at the earliest. So any summer fun we might have gotten to see in South America from the UFC or anything really, unfortunately, officially nixed as of right now.
Packers just traded up.
Ooh, interesting.
They took Jordan Love. Not a fan.
Did they take Jordan Love?
Yeah.
Roger's gonna be pissed.
I was gonna say,
It's all right. That kid's
He
not
can
good.
be a little bit of a diva.
Roger's got nothing to worry about. I think that's a wasted draft choice. They could have picked him up in the second round.
yeah, that's
He reminds him. He's He's calling Kaepernick with a better intermediate touch. Take it, which I mean, it's not a bad thing.
I was going to
Colin
say that's
Kaepernick
not.
was
Yeah,
one of the
there's
better
way worse
quarterbacks
things
in the
to
league
be.
for a couple of years till he got
Absolutely,
hurt.
absolutely.
So there we go.
Yeah.
Interesting to see how that shakes out.
We'll see. Only time will tell. I think they could have picked him up in the second, though.
I agree that I think that was a bad first round pick.
Depends
for
on
sure.
who was coming up. It depends on who was coming up, who was looking at trading up, because you know the chatter is always going on this stuff.
True.
I'm just saying they need a fucking offensive line more than they need a backup quarterback.
But to get back to UFC 250, I mean, if they still want to run it, I mean, they've got a contract with that casino.
Right. Well,
They
that's
can probably get an exemption at this point.
yeah. That's kind of what we were suspecting initially that they were going to end up doing because that actually ties into the next part here, which is all kind of one big conglomerate at this point. Obviously, the UFC announced this week. The UFC themselves actually announced this week they have officially nixed the card for UFC Fight Night Lincoln, UFC Fight Night Oklahoma City, UFC 250, UFC Fight Night San Diego, and then a UFC that was unnamed and unlocated as of right now in the end of June. This is kind of what we suspected here. All the locations of the shows that we anticipated seeing are kind of falling through as this reunion tour kind of really sweeps the world up with it. But now we also do know that May 9th is officially a go somewhere in Florida. We haven't gotten the exact location, only that it is in Florida. Last we have been updated. So we do have the location for the May 9th event, which they are referring to now officially again as UFC 249, the second billing.
It's going to be in Jacksonville.
Oh, did they officially announce Jacksonville?
They did announce Jacksonville.
Interesting. I did not catch the Jacksonville, only that we were in Florida. So, okay. So we're looking at Jacksonville, which, I mean, kind of
It makes sense. Florida's been granting exceptions.
Yeah.
So we might be seeing a bunch of UFC events in Florida.
At least they've got a spot for it. For the time being, unless somebody decides they want to call Disney and get Mickey Mouse involved again, because
Right.
God knows that's a possibility.
Well, and the interesting thing about it is I'm not sure how much truth there is to it now that everything has kind of been etch-a-sketch shaken and then redrawn. But if you remember, when they were initially talking about it before they had not before, but after the Tachi Palace had been announced and then canceled, Dana White was still saying that the place that he has for the next event after that, their quote-unquote backup place, for those of you listening, air quotes, that they had that place locked up for 2 solid months so that they can do an every week promotion down there. Plus, they were working on the island. So, I'm not sure if now it was Dana trying to say that he had Tachi's Palace locked up for 2 months and he was ready to do the fights out in California for 2 months. Or if maybe this
he
place...
only had Tachi Palace for like a month.
That's what I was thinking. So maybe it was this place that he was talking about that he's basically been backdoor dealing with DeSantis and whoever the fuck else he needed to lock down a backup place in case Tachi's Palace fell through. We might get to see a couple weeks worth of UFC down in Florida if knock on fucking wood, we can make it through the next 2 weeks without anything massively drastic and crazy happening. This might be the path back to us getting events again, even if, again, they are, crowdless.
So, so it's going to be Florida in Jacksonville on May 9th at the ViStar Veterans Memorial Arena in Jacksonville.
Interesting indeed. Apologize, not the Backstreet Boys. It's allergies. Calm down.
Speaking of venues, the UFC did apply for a licensing for Fight Island as a name.
I saw that they have officially filed for the copyright licensing for. I'd say it was a two-parter. It was they filed for the copyright and the trademark rights to Fight Island and UFC Fight Island both, and were granted both. So the marketing is in the works. It looks like whether Florida is the location we see for a couple weeks or not, the island idea, Mortal Kombat is fucking happening. Like, we're full steam ahead regardless of what fucking Mickey and Captain ESPN decide that they want to do. Fight Island is going ahead here, so that's kind of interesting to see as well.
Definitely going to be interesting to see how this all plays out over the next couple of months.
Right? No shit. Two-part story here. Update specifically leading into these upcoming events, and then the subsequent now second coming of UFC 249 down in Jacksonville coming up in a couple weeks here. Two fighters that I was actually very excited to see both fights for on May 9th to UFC 249 second coming card have both now been removed from that card. The first of which was Lyman Good, who was removed from that card back a couple weeks ago, and we now have found out why, because in the meanwhile, they had just said that he had to pull out due to potential conflicts. They didn't give any details. Well, we know what that conflict was, and that conflict was the Backstreet Boys. He had been positively confirmed and then subsequently hospitalized because of the Backstreet Boys. He caught it. He was down with the sickness. But the good news, not only did he beat it and is back to quote-unquote normal, and it is ready as of this next coming Monday to officially get back to training to hopefully, obviously not for 249, but hopefully be ready to go when the UFC puts on its next big promotion so that he can get back in it. Says that his body was not too terribly damaged, just short-term holy shitness. So, you know, hopefully that is actually the extent of what it was. And, you know, nice to hear, again, some positive stories coming out about people making it through the craziness that this is, because those don't get a lot of coverage right now. Ironic that it took... Right. A little ironic that it took a literal cage fighter to be one of the first big examples of a guy who can go through and come back out and then, you know, get back to some semblance of, air quotes, normal once it's all said and done. But we live in strange fucking times, so strange news isn't really that strange anymore. The other part of that story, the one that I'm really bummed about, obviously I still am bummed about not getting to see Lyman Good. I think that guy's got a hell of a fucking future, especially if this, you know, reunion didn't really do too much of a number on him and he can get back to it. But the other fight that I know a lot of us were legitimately looking forward to, one of the more realistic equal fights on what's going to be the 249 second coming card. The Lioness herself announced this week Amanda Nunes is out of May 9th. She just is not comfortable with what is now, because of everything going on, going to be essentially a somewhat short camp, because she had been booked and unbooked and booked and unbooked so many times in the last couple weeks with all this. She is not willing to defend her title on what would be a short notice camp.
I mean, that's fair enough.
It sucks, but it has to be acknowledged as well that this is a circumstance beyond anybody's control. Nobody chose it to go down this way, and you can't be mad at a champion not wanting to risk their championship on a short notice, not full camp development. They aren't giving a chance to show their championship levels, and as much as it sucks, I kind of get it, and I think this one actually gets a little bit of a free pass for a back out on a fight.
And you know, if it's Amanda Nunes, if there was any off chance that she could come in normal out of a camp, like she totally would have taken this fight.
Yeah, she's one that we know isn't going to shy away from a challenge unless there's no way that she can make it at her best to that challenge, which is exactly what she's saying here. So I mean, it's not like she ran to Russia last minute knowing she was going to get locked in and then, quote unquote, couldn't get out. She is here. She's staying here. She's telling us why she can't make it, and it's an understandable request. So, as shitty as it is to get one of the reasons we were looking forward to this May 9th card knocked out, that also does give a little bit more wiggle room for what we were talking about. That main card needed some adjustment in. Hopefully, maybe now we get to see it, even though we are still going to get to see Ferguson versus Gaethje for some fucking reason for another interim belt officially.
I mean, that's also not their fault either.
Right.
'Cause I think Khabib went back to Russia, called up Putin, and said, "Hey, can we close the borders? I'm not going to make weight this time."
Yeah,
And
this
Putin's
isn't going to
like-
happen. So let's just make
Putin's
it.
like, "Did you bring belt?"
Right.
Yes, I've got the belt with me. Okay.
Lock it down. Yeah, I agree.
I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole because it pisses me off the more I think about it.
Right.
I'll talk all the shit I want about Khabib. Come wrestle fuck me, dude.
Right. Yeah, no shit.
Oh, you can't.
Yeah, well, I mean, he can in September-ish. Oh, interesting little piece of news here. Kind of a good portrait, I would say, or a good glimpse into one of the larger differences between the way large combat sports organizations are going about this reunion time that we're living in right now. If you look over at UFC, Dana White is doing Dana White things. He is trying to lock down casinos in California. He is taking on, arenas in Florida. He is building Mortal Kombat Island. He is offering to use the Apex Legends facilities in UFC's backlot from the Performance Institute. He is doing everything and anything he can to get a fight tomorrow for people to watch. And then you look over to the other side of the field here, and you've got Scott Coker and Bellator, who announced this week that sometime between late June and early July, they plan to bring Bellator back completely crowdless for the rest of the year for safety precautions, and they're going to be hosting it on a soundstage recording studio in Hollywood, so that it can be completely controlled, completely regulated, properly broadcast, but done safely and viewer-free in the immediate area. I mean, I get it. It's absolutely one way to go about it, and especially when you've got someone as loud and as upfront as Dana going the public opposite direction. I think it might work if they do it properly. I just think that this might be waiting a little too long, especially if the UFC gets back out and they've got multiple shows done before then.
I mean, I get it. I get why they're doing it. I mean, if you're gonna, you have to wait on California. Number one, that's the big thing. You have to wait on California. If you're going to do this in a sound stage and you want your broadcast level to look that high quality, you have to wait on the state government, and they have already pushed everything out into June in California. So
yeah, I mean, and so with that they may or may not even push it out farther, depending on where their curve sits. How long the line is to get into the reunion, it's all going to depend, because at this point, I don't know that they're going to be able to pull that off like that in California unless they're doing it on a soundstage on tribal land somewhere.
Right.
You guys know of any of those?
Yeah, right. Awfully
well, they
convenient.
already had one line. They already had one lined up. They had to have the state. They had to have the
Right.
governor, and they had to have Donald Trump call the casino to be like, "Hey, yo, don't do this." Like Dana was going ahead. They already had
I
it.
know
on
Dana
plan.
was, but I'm talking Bellator.
Right.
Do they have a spot like that? Because
I'm sure.
Mohegan
I'm sure.
Sun.
I'm betting Dana would let him use Mortal Kombat Island if it gets built up in time.
And that's one of the interesting things that I actually wanted to talk about here is that now that we know that this is more than just a funny joke for those of us that are insiders to talk about, like, this is a real thing. Like, Dana White is confirmed. Like, this is more than just a rumor or something to, keep talk going. He supposedly has a real legitimate island that has legitimate infrastructure and a fight arena being built on it right now, so that over the summer, regardless of what else happens internationally, there's a Mortal Kombat Island to hold real broadcastable fights on.
Yep.
And I wonder how much the premium that they're going to charge them to use it.
That's what I was going to say. Now, if that's the only place that fights can be happening like this, aside from, 9 guys in a fucking grain silo in Spokane somewhere, like, are they going to start offering, or would other organizations start inquiring about using Mortal Kombat Island to hold fights? Because, ONE FC has got a fucking roster and a half. Bellator's got a full fucking roster, Invicta's got a pretty fucking stacked roster. PFL's got a whole bunch of people and no season of 2020 to go right now. If they get Mortal Kombat Island built and fully operational, would this potentially be the catalyst to maybe see some cross promotion if we start getting these other guys bringing their whole shows there? You're going to have talent bumping into each other. You're not going to build a, 10 times size UFC Performance Institute on a fucking island somewhere in 2 weeks and have it operational enough to separate the people like they do in Las Vegas. People are going to see each other on an island.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I knew where the island was. I wish we had some idea kind of what it looks like and what the infrastructure is going to be.
Or at least a degree of how big it's going to be, so we know what to kind of anticipate. Like, I get the secrecy, but like,
if you think that the infrastructure for fights is already there because the UFC is going to be using this, it has to be cheaper than renting a Hollywood soundstage,
right?
And dragging all your shit all over the place. If you're using the UFC's Fight Island, it's got to be cheaper because all you got to do is bring your
people down,
bring your people and your mat covers, and that's all you got to do.
Yeah, because everything else would be ready. The same. He said that there's going to be a sanctioning body athletic commission presiding over the island, just like they do with the tribal lands. Same scenario. It's not tied to any particular country, but it is independent and it is a sanctioned governing body, just like on tribal lands for the casino fights. Same type of scenario. So everything but exactly your canvas covers for the fucking mats, and then your crew, your personnel, will be ready for Fight Island. Yeah,
I mean that's
the only.
And I mean, for a lot of the little smaller organizations, I mean, it's gonna be a much better situation.
Oh yeah, yeah.
With the quality of equipment that's gonna be there compared to what you're normally working with, like it's gonna take your stuff to the next game. I mean, Dana would be a fool to just let his people use it.
Right.
Like, you totally got to rent out Mortal Kombat Island.
That's because that's almost promotion unto itself, just to rent out Mortal Kombat to other organizations to put fights on.
The other side to that, though, is he may not want to, because guess what? If they can't find a place to host, we put them into dirt by everybody only has one option to choose from.
Yeah, when you're the only game in town, you can determine who, what, where, when, and how much everything is.
That's right. You can take your ball and go home at any point you want.
This is very true as well, and that's kind of what I'm wondering, is because as much as we are all fucking eternal optimists in this sense of it, at least, and want to see the best of everybody fight the best of everybody, regardless of what fucking paper you signed, I want to see the best guys fight the best guys in all divisions, all fucking sports, all styles. That's the ideal thing, I think, of most combat sports fans, is that we want to see the best compete against the best. We want to see who's the best and how they are the best. How do they get to be the best? How do they confirm they're the best? But you can't really do that if you put fences in the middle of the fucking playground and you won't let Johnny play with Timmy because he signed with Dana instead of Scott. Like, I'm kind of hoping that, at least to some degree, Mortal Kombat Island might be the catalyst that we all want to just get everybody in the same fucking pot. Stir the stoop together. Everybody can play. It could be okay. Hopefully. But
Yep. Wishful thinking.
yeah, I'm gonna say it. We all know what assuming can get you, so we're gonna have to wait and see how it actually plays out in the long run.
The Ravens just stole Patrick Queen from the rest of the NFL. Like there's no way he should have lasted as long as he just did. There's no flipping way.
Interesting.
Anyway,
So one last little piece of news I do want to go over here before we get into the namesake topic, reason for the season, meat and potatoes, as it were, of this particular episode. Unfortunately, a little bit of a downer news, but not entirely. It's complicated. A couple weeks ago, we saw a matchup where a gentleman did a thing in the octagon that we all pretty much at this point know that you should never do. And if you're gonna do, you do it very briefly, you make it very, very obvious what you're doing, you get the ha-has from it, and then you move the fuck on. This particular gentleman did not do this thing that I'm talking about in that particular manner, and it cost him. What I'm referring to here is Ian Kutalaba's matchup a couple weeks ago, where he fainted or faked being rocked, pretended to wobble, and referee Kevin McDonald thought that he was really hurt, jumped in and stopped the fucking match. To which, obviously Kutalaba immediately protested. His opponent, took the W but said, hey, you don't want to lose like that, don't play like that, which is fair, I get, but at the same time, fuck off. Get the entire fuck out of here. He didn't get dropped. He didn't get rocked. He barely got clipped with one hook when he did the fucking, pretend move. And then they ruled it a stoppage. They kept it a TKO. Well, fast forward a little bit. Obviously, the UFC saw that for what it actually was and understood that this was an in-the-moment stoppage. Upon watching back on the replay, which you can from 9,000 different camera angles now, it is very, very clear and apparent. Ian Kutalaba was doing a very poor job